Stay until the end. We need fresh blood to lead this company forward. That's what Brandon Kerr, our newly appointed Director of Operations, said during the quarterly review, right before glancing at me like I was a forgotten relic. My name is Ethan Vance, 39 years old. Stay until the end, and I spent the last 3 years building APEXCORE technologies from scratch. Not in theory, not on paper. I mean actually building it, pulling all-nighters under busted server racks, wiring routers by hand. Stay until the end, designing infrastructure when we couldn't even afford proper tools. Back when we worked out of a drafty warehouse in Raleigh, North Carolina, the founders knew my name. They knew that without the back-end systems I had created. Stay until the end. Their revolutionary platform would have been nothing more than marketing fluff, but now the board wanted a strategic visionary. That's how Brandon landed the job. Suits, slideshows, stay until the end. Buzzwords like synergy and angel transformation. In 6 months, he'd never once crashed a server or stayed late on a Christmas Eve at that meeting. He looked up from his laptop, just long enough to say my work had been adequate. I didn't argue, but that's when I felt it. That cold certainty in my chest. The kind that says you better start reading the fine print. And so, I did. Stay until the end. I walked straight from that MAP meeting to my office. Not in a rush. Just steady with that sinking feeling in my gut that something big was coming, and not in a good way. Brandon Kerr had only been here for half a year. Stay until the end. But he already had the authority to reshuffle teams, rewrite systems, and, judging by the way he'd looked at me, probably fire whoever didn't fit into his shiny, streamlined vision. The first thing I did was open the company directory. Stay until enough 4 new hires in the last 30 days, all with polished titles like Chief Innovation Analyst and Digital Transformation Strategist. Fancy and expensive. I knew what folks like that cost. Stay until the end. I'd been the one negotiating vendor budgets and payroll projections back when we were broke and eating vending machine snacks for lunch. Not one of them had been here when our systems crashed during our first live demo. Stay until the end. Not one had worked through the snowstorm that knocked out power on launch week. And none of them had written a single line of the custom architecture that made our software actually perform better than anything on the market. Stay until the end, they didn't know the truth because nobody told them. To them, I was just IT support. But 3 years ago, I was the guy wiring together laptops on loan and coding through migraines just to get us noticed by beta clients. Back then, stay until the end. I didn't care about titles. I believed in the mission. I took payment in equity and pizza. The founders, Jake and Peter, they were wild dreamers, but they knew they needed someone to ground the tech. That someone was me. Stay until the end, and I poured everything I had into making APEXCORE work. My reward, being call acquit, by a guy who thought API meant annual profit increase. That's when I pulled out the original version of my contract. I hadn't read it in over 2 years. Stay until the end. Most folks don't, not after they've gone full-time. But I never got around to renegotiating mine, and thankfully, neither had the company. Stay until the end. I had stayed on paper as an independent consultant for longer than most realized, and it meant I had negotiated in some IP protections early on. At the time, they seemed almost laughable. Standard stuff my attorney buddy recommended. Stay until the end, just in case things went south. Back then, the company was desperate to keep me. Jake had signed whatever made me feel secure now. Those little clauses buried in the fine print meant that the encryption protocols I'd written, the deployment algorithms I designed, most importantly, the production authentication key that powered our live servers, still belonged to me. Brandon had no idea. The next morning, the announcement dropped in my inbox at 8:47 a.m. Subject line. Staying in the end, team restructuring effective. Just like that, I was out. No meeting, no phone call. Just a form letter with boilerplate language about streamlining operations and positioning for future growth. 3 years of work, loyalty. Stay until the end. And results. Dismissed with a paragraph that could have gone to a temp who'd worked there 2 weeks. I didn't go back inside the building. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, reading the email again and again. It didn't change. Stay until the end. The message didn't soften. I had been replaced. Not because I failed, but because I didn't fit the brand anymore. But here's the thing when you're the one who built the system, when you've wired every node and written every line of logic. Stay until the end. You don't need revenge. You just need access. And I still afternoon. I saw it and I started reviewing our deployment and infrastructure, the upcoming launch celebration. Brandon's grand vision to impress investors, media, stay until the end, and corporate partners, was centered around a live demonstration of our new platform, the very one I had built, line by line. What Brandon and his crew didn't know was that the servers hosting our demo were just staging environments. Stay until the end. The real production servers, the ones that handled live client traffic, verified security layers, and integrated with third-party services, were locked behind a custom encryption protocol I had designed. and I was the only one who could unlock them. Stay until the end. Friday night arrived fast. I shaved ironed a suit I hadn't worn since Jake and Peter's first funding pitch, and drove across town to the Grand Summit Convention Center. I wasn't on the guest list, but that didn't matter. My old badge still worked. Stay until the end, and the security guards. They remembered me from every holiday party, emergency weekend, and late-night system outage I'd quietly fixed. To them, I wasn't a threat. I was just another name they hadn't been told to forget yet. Stay until the end. The lobby buzzed with excitement. Over 500 people, investors in tailored suits, tech reporters with cameras slung over shoulders, corporate partners holding champagne flutes and brochures. APEXCORE's logo was everywhere. Stay until the end, splashed across digital signage with the tagline, redefining speed, reinventing security, all of it built on a platform they didn't actually control. Brandon Hale, the director who fired me, was already on stage when I entered the main hall. Stay until the end. He looked exactly like you'd expect a fast, rising tech executive to look. Expensive charcoal suit, perfect posture, speaking with that fake TED Talk rhythm designed to make mediocre ideas sound brilliant. Tonight, Brandon said, stay until the end, holding a wireless mic in one hand. We don't just celebrate a product. We celebrate from philosophy, innovation, acceleration, freedom from the slow, the stale, the outdated. I stood in the back and watched him gesture toward a massive display. Stay until the end. The screen showed real-time metrics blazing, fast transaction speeds, seamless data integration, ultra-secure encryption logs, all simulated beautifully from our staging environment. Only I knew it wasn't live. Tatel into it, none of it was connected to the production servers. Because those keys, they were still sitting right here in my jacket pocket. Brandon's voice swelled with drama. We made tough calls, he said. So I parted ways with legacy contributors who couldn't keep pace. That was my cue. I stepped forward slow and steady. Some people noticed. A few turned. Funds came up. The murmurs started. By the time I reached the front row, Brandon paused mid-pitch and stared straight at me. He did not expect to see me here. I kept my voice calm and clear. My name is Ethan Marsh, I said. Mr. Hale was just talking about me. I figured I should come say thank you in person for showing me exactly what this company now stands for. There was tension in the air. A ripple of discomfort swept through the audience. Some people looked amused, others shocked. Stay until the end, then and a few deeply uncomfortable. Brandon tried to smile. Well, that's if very enjoying the show. Oh, I did, I replied. So much, I brought you a gift. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small black box. Stay until he ramped. I handed it to him, making sure the press and the crowd saw it clearly. A few reporters moved in closer, cameras already recording. Brandon opened the box on stage. Inside was a single USB drive, the label. Taparo diufiti and pilo amant kawai APEXCORE Live SYSTEM. The moment his eyes landed on it, the color drained from his face. What is this? He asked quietly, almost whispering. I leaned in. Stay until the end. It's the only thing that makes your shiny platform actually work. Just then, the big demo screen behind him glitched. Once, then again, before going completely black. Then came the wave. Every tablet in the room flashed error messages. Every laptop stopped loading dashboards. The data feeds that had been thrilling the investors gone. Total silence. Brandon stood frozen, USB still in hand like it might burn him. Stay until the end. His lead engineer, Tyler, a kid with a master's degree and zero clue how the infrastructure worked, ran up to the stage in a panic. We're locked out, he hissed. Every server's rejecting access. Stay at end. We can't even reach the live environment. Panic broke out. Journalists scribbled notes furiously. Investors muttered into phones. Executives pulled aside APEXCORE sales staff demanding answers. Brandon turned to me, shaking. You need to fix this. I smiled gently. That depends. Do you still think I'm pathetic? He didn't need to. Brandon Hale didn't say a word. Not when the screen died. Not when Tyler started panicking. Till the end. Not when over 24 executives and eyes began whispering to each other in frantic tones. He just stood there on that stage under the soft blue lighting, holding a USB like it was radioactive. And me? I simply turned and walked off. I'd done my part. Behind me, someone called out. Who was that? Another voice, this time a reporter, shouted, Was that your former systems architect? Why does he have your deployment key? I didn't stick around for the rest of it. The moment Brandon realized I had just exposed every ounce of smoke and mirrors he'd wrapped around their platform. He knew the fallout had only begun. I drove home in silence. No music, no radio. Stay until the end. Just the sound of tires humming on the asphalt and the weight of years, finally lifting from my shoulders. By Monday morning, it was all over the news. Launch disaster at APEXCORE. Stay until the end. System crash blamed on former engineer. Ex-architect shuts down system he built after abrupt termination. They tried to spin it as sabotage, but that didn't fly. Too many witnesses. Too many smart people asking the right questions. And, most importantly, documentation. Every build, every line of code, every integration sequence, all neatly backed up, time-stamped, and archived under my name. And when their legal team tried to accuse me of theft, my lawyer dropped a 132-page binder on their desk titled Pira PMAS Was Thames, Agram and TNCS Sistan Mas H. It included a little footnote in section 11.3 all code bases frameworks. Stay until the end. And authentication structures developed independently and deployed prior to signed integration shall remain the intellectual property of the developer unless specifically purchased or licensed by APEXCORE Inc. They had never purchased it. Stay until the end. They had just assumed I'd be around forever. That I'd stay loyal after being called outdated. And the way. 2 days after the failed launch, I got a call from the APEXCORE board chair. Ethan, she began cautiously. Stay to the end. We're prepared to make this right. Name your rate. We need the system operational again. I didn't even blink. I'm not coming back. A pause. Stay until the end. Then perhaps a short-term contract just to stabilize things. I already have a contract, I said, with someone else. You see, while Brandon was polishing his speech and planning his dramatic victory lap. Stay until the end. I'd been having quiet conversations with APEXCORE's main competitor, Northline Systems. They knew who I was, knew what I'd built, and more importantly, they let me build it again, on my terms. When the APEXCORE disaster hit the front page, say until the end, Northline stock numped, 2%. Just the rumor that I was consulting with them sent a wave of investor confidence their way. 1 week later, I signed a full-time contract as Chief Technology Advisor. A month later, we launched Vanguard Shield, staying to the platform with the exact features APEXCORE had promised. But actually working, 2 months later, Northline acquired APEXCORE. Brandon was gone by then. Quietly, resigned, under pressure. Tyler, stay until the end. The new face of modern architecture, faded into LinkedIn silence, and me. I walked through the same office I once helped wire for security, from the server room to the executive lounge, now under a different banner. With people who understood that experience doesn't get outdated, it matures, sharpens. When I bumped into the receptionist who once greeted me every morning, she smiled and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Marsh." I smiled back. "Thanks." Stay until the end. Let's build something real this time. The fallout came fast, faster than I expected. By the time Wednesday rolled around, APEXCORE's entire production environment was still offline. Clients couldn't log in. Support lines were flooded. Stay until the end of contracts were being canceled faster than their PR team could draft apology statements. And Brandon Hale, he'd gone radio silent. But the board wasn't quiet, not anymore. That Thursday afternoon, to the end, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. Jacob Connolly, one of APEXCORE's original founders and still a 40% stakeholder. "Ethan," he said, his tone wary but direct. "Stay until the end. We need to talk." He wasn't surprised by what had happened. In fact, he'd seen the signs long before the launch night implosion. But the board had been dazzled by Brandon's jargon, his flashy presentations, and his promises of exponential growth. They wanted a corporate makeover, and Brandon sold it to them wrapped in a shiny box of future vision. Now that box had exploded. On stage in front of investors, the media, and future clients. "I made a mistake," Jacob admitted. "Stay until the end. I should have pushed back harder. I should have protected the people who actually built this place." There was silence on the line, then he continued. "The board met this morning. Brandon's out." I raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Strong, but it made sense. APEXCORE's valuation had dropped 60% and fiving and drive draws. Clients' credibility was shot. "We want you back," he said. "Not just to fix this, we want you to lead." I didn't answer immediately. Truth was, stay until the end. I'd already started rebuilding at Northline Systems and they respected my work. They didn't call it adequate. They didn't cut me out of planning meetings. They didn't sideline me for buzzwords and empty suits. Stay until the end. But this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everyone like me who'd ever been pushed out of their own creation because someone newer, louder, or younger showed up with a better slide deck. So I said, in condition, Jacob, waited. The team, Brandon, hired. Tyler, Morrison, and the others. I'm not firing them. I'm going to lead them. "Yeah, surprise." "Yes," I said, "but under my rules." System was built in why. Understand they almost destroyed. Jacob didn't hesitate. "It's yours. Full control. Title equity. Stay until the end. Compensation. You name it." I returned the next Monday morning. Not as a developer, not even as an architect. I walked into that building as Chief Technology Officer and partner. My name was on the new company letterhead. Stay until the end. The first thing I did was restore access to the production environment. Within hours, client accounts were back online, transaction logs stabilized, and support tickets dropped by 80% before noon. I personally called our top 20 clients. I didn't sugarcoat what happened, I just told the truth. We lost our way. And now, we're rebuilding. Properly. To my surprise, most of them didn't walk away. They appreciated the honesty. Some even applauded it. Stay until the end. The media narrative changed overnight. The man behind APEXCORE's reboot, architect, returns to restore platform integrity. But this wasn't about redemption for me. It was about respect for the work, for the process. Stay until the end. And for the people who never made the headlines but carried the entire operation on their backs. I sat down with Tyler and the new hires that afternoon. I'm not here to fire you, I told them. I'll stay until the end. I'm here to show you how things actually work. They were quiet at first, embarrassed, maybe even nervous. Tyler looked especially unsure. So I pulled up the code base and began walking them through line by line. Stay until the end, not just what worked, but why. By week's end, they weren't interns shadowing the past, they were contributors helping build the future, but now with context, humility, and precision. As for Brandon Hale, last I heard, stay until the end. He took a director role at a mid-sized SaaS company out in Atlanta. Probably still wearing those expensive suits. Probably still pitching someone else's work with a microphone in hand. But I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I had something better, ownership, and the knowledge that I'd done it without burning bridges, without bitterness, just clarity and strength. The system was mine again. But this time was the company months past. The chaos faded. APEXCORE was back on track, leaner. Stay until the end, smarter and far more humble. I built something better this time, not just in code, but in people. I didn't need applause. Just seeing young engineers like Tyler grow, watching them solve problems with both brains and backbone. That was enough. Stay until the end. I've been fired, called pathetic, erased from the picture I helped paint. But I didn't burn the canvas and reclaim the brush. And with it, I chose to rebuild on my terms. If you've ever been pushed aside, disrespected, stay until the end. Too old. Listen up. Your value isn't defined by who forgets you, but by what you never forget how to do. Experience, patience, and quiet strength aren't obsolete. They're the foundation. And sometimes, stay until the end. Walking away with your dignity is the boldest move you can make. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're gone. Then show them what legacy looks like. If this story hit home, tell us in the comments. Man, stay till the end. What's one moment in your life when walking away actually made you stronger? Like what you heard. Subscribe for more stories about wisdom, grit, and the quiet power of doing things right. Let's remind the world some of us don't get loud. We get even by building better.